We'll get to our guest in just a moment. Steve Millington is in studio with us. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 8:34 and we're at 40, on our way into the upper 60s, maybe 70 before the day is over. Nobody's complaining, right? Just a quick note. For those of you, I'm getting closer every day, obviously, to retirement age. Not that I'm spending too much time thinking about it, but the day may come when I don't do this any longer. And you have to have a plan. And we've been talking about Waddell and Reed. I drove by Waddell and Reed on Eastland just the other day while I was doing some shopping. And it's one of the oldest firms in the country offering mutual funds. And in fact, Waddell and Reed offers two mutual fund families. This is a company that's been in business 80 years. That generally means you know what you're doing if you can stick around that long. And I want to point out, too, as well, that there's an approach they take to help you plan. And they look at each piece of the puzzle as a client that you would have. But they do remind you, Waddell and Reed, that you've got to have proper expectations. And they'll build those plans around your needs and your goals individually. Waddell and Reed helps people manage money, and at Waddell and Reed, they take planning personally. Steve Millington, school votes today across the state of Idaho, and about $750 million at stake.
Boy, yeah, this is huge. Idaho's election process is that in March, the second Tuesday of March, we have all school bond elections. I think they do that so that the various school entities, especially if they're after supplemental levies, can adjust their budgeting process beginning on July 1. So they have got all kinds of levies on the table. $715 million of school bonds from various entities across the state of Idaho. Some of them are huge. Some of them are not quite so huge. But that is a record number. In the past, the previous high number was $430 million, of which $360 million was approved. This year, it is huge numbers, and comes from our largest growing areas. The Ada, the Boise School District is looking for
Same idea.
Yeah, same neighborhood. But we have two school districts up there. We have the Boise School District and we have the, quote, West Ada School District. It used to be called Meridian. Now it's called West Ada. But the Boise School District is looking for $172.5 million for construction. And they're going to remodel a bunch of elementary schools, build a new technical center, build a new high school. Wow. West Ada School District, now that one requires a 2/3 approval because it's a dedicated construction bond that has a 30-year life on it. West Ada is doing a different approach. They are looking for a supplemental override. It's called a plant facilities levy. So it's different from a bonding. It's a plant facilities levy for $160 million. And that would be $16 million a year for 10 years. Now, that one also requires a 60% approval because it has a 10-year window on it rather than a 2/3 majority for a 30-year window. Coeur d'Alene's looking for $35 million. Lewiston is looking for $60 million. Kuna, which is also right over there in the Ada County Meridian complex, is looking for $40 million. It just goes on down the list. Twin Falls, Idaho is looking for $8.5 million spread over 2 years. There is a number here for Jerome. They're looking for $1.3 million. Murtaugh is looking for a 10-year, $1.75 million, which is $175,000 a year for 10 years. Gooding is looking for $1.3 million, which is $650,000.
We're talking some smaller districts here.
These are smaller districts. Jerome has one in there. Hanson has a 2-year, $580,000 one. Even, it goes right on down the list. They even have one in here for Camas County. Here's Camas County, a 2-year, $600,000 supplemental levy. That's $300,000. Camas County, That's Fairfield and Hill City, and they've only got 1,500 people in the whole county.
And they have a beautiful old ancient schoolhouse that was closed in
Wow.
the 1950s that is
Yeah.
still standing.
Nice.
But the thing is, it's the growth because just Friday I had a couple of people who live in Murtaugh in Jack Johnson and Forrest Anderson in studio with us for different segments, and they were commenting about the growth just in Murtaugh alone, new housing developments. And so the more we see this, the demands are going to grow on the local schools.
The schools is going to be one of the first places we're going to see these heavy demands. Now, uh, Boise School District, with their $173 million issue, they haven't had a bond issue for some time. I can't tell you how long it's been, but it's been a while. West Ada, which is Meridian, which is actually the fastest growing segment of Ada County, they passed a $200 million one about 5 years ago. Now they're looking for, well, it's going to be $160 million spread over 10 years. And their objective is we'll get 16 million bucks a year. We'll gather up all the money this year and next year. Then we'll build a couple of new schools.
And no reflection on the music, but these school districts are making you an offer you can't refuse.
Yes.
We've got
When you started playing the music, I thought to myself, "You're done, Millington. It's over."
we've got 42 at 8:40. More with Steve Millington coming up on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our studio guest is Steve Millington. He's joining us. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Also, Bill Cawley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:42. We're at 41. We were just talking about school bond issues in many cases that are a reflection of the tremendous growth in population in Idaho. Now, the flip side of this coin is growth means you need new roads. Secondly, a lot of the current roads, you don't have to drive very far from your house to see what winter did to them. So we have one of our own here in Twin Falls County. He is proposing
Yep.
a traditional way to repair roads.
Well, Senator Burt Brackett is chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and we call him one of our own. He actually lives in Owyhee County, but the only way you can get to, well, the primary way to get to his house is down through Rogerson and across over to Three Creek. Um, so, Idaho has used a process called Garvey bonds. They're guaranteed annual revenue. And what we really do with them is we issue a bunch of bonds, and then we use federal gas tax receipts coming back into the state of Idaho to pay off all those bonds. They did this a few years ago. I'm trying to think of the guy who was governor at the time we did it. Can't think of his name. Shame on me. But anyway, they funded about $600 or $700 million worth of those kinds of bonds, and did huge amounts of construction work in the state of Idaho. And now that money has been expended, and we're to the break even point, so to speak. We don't have enough money coming in to the transportation department funding for them to go out and take on huge projects of road to be expanded, because they don't have the money to do it in a one-shot deal.
We bringing this up, the number, the dollar figure that he's proposing will remedy all of the current issues right now. But even then,
That's correct.
it's not a long-term solution.
It doesn't take the approach of being a long horizon result.
And we're talking. He's proposed raising over
300. There was two bills. I think one of them died for lack of a second, but there was two proposals. One was a $500 million Garvey package. The other one was a $300 million Garvey package, and the $300 million one seems to be the one that the Senate Transportation Committee is going to send out to the floor. So that means that it's also going to be the same one that the House is going to dovetail onto.
I know there are people listening who don't like to pay any taxes.
Yeah,
We were just talking during the break, though, and Idahoans don't pay much in the way of taxes.
we really don't, and we don't understand that as well as perhaps we should. There was a report issued by the oh boy, Tax Foundation of America, and it had 2017 comparative tax data for all states. There's a few things about Idaho we need to understand. This tax think tank policy put Idaho number 44th in per capita income among all states. And that number is about $38,400 per capita per year. And by the way, that's a 2015 number. That's not a 2016 or couldn't be a 17 number. So that's 18 months old already. But we were 44th in the nation. But our tax collections our tax collections were 47th among all states, and that put us in the bottom tenth of all states as far as uh, tax collections per capita and spending per capita. So we are not stupid crazy on spending money, but we don't have much of it to spend.
Our guest, Steve Millington, is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 42. Bill Colley with you as well this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And I've mentioned it on the show several times, and I've written about it as well. If you have good roads, for instance, you can build all of these new school buildings, but if you don't have roads to get there, it doesn't do you much good. If you want new business to come here and provide even more jobs and better jobs, you need good roads.
That's right.
So the road, everything else comes from good roads.
One of the primary factors we have to look at, they call it infrastructure. And that's kind of the bulwark of how we get things done. It's the roads. In cities, it is the water distribution and the disposal of wastewater. And from a Magic Valley standpoint, just to shuck it right down real hard, real quick, we are primarily an ag product based community. You can go out here to Chobani, and yes, they do have trackage, railroad trackage, but there are times of the day when you can go out there and there will be a dozen or more semi trucks lined up. Some delivering milk, and that's easy to tell which ones they are. They're the ones with this big round circular tube that's behind the tractor. And then there are the reefers, refrigerated trailers, and those are the big ones, that 12 feet high and 53 feet long, and they fill those up full of finished product and ship them all over the country. How do they do that? On the roads. On the roads. And I'm sorry, but I'll bet you 99% of Chobani's finished product leaves the state of Idaho. And the same holds true for Cliff Bar. The same holds true for Amalgamated Sugar with their, I think their brand name is called White Satin. You've got several potato processors. You got Lamb Weston, you got Simplots, you got Orida, you've got the dehydrators. And that product has to be shipped out of Idaho. And the vast, huge majority is on roads.
You even think about the high-tech businesses like Micron. It's going somewhere else.
They've got to have the basic infrastructure requirement to make them work. Now, I don't know that we talked about it here, but in the newspaper a couple of weeks ago, they had a couple of articles about road requirements in Treasure Valley. One of them was the Franklin Road access between Meridian and Caldwell. And it's a 15-mile stretch of road, and it's a two-laner, and it's just death on wheels. And they want to stretch that out to a four-laner with a suicide lane in the middle. And so everybody understands the term suicide lane. That's the turn lane, left turn lane in the middle. You get you coming and going, suicide lane. Anyway, they want to stretch that out, $300 million. And then the city of Caldwell is petitioning the DOT that if you travel on I-86 from Nampa to the Oregon border, just as you get past the Nampa complexes, that thing shrinks down to a two-laner. Nampa into Boise is either a 3, and the closer you get to Boise, it moves into a 4 or a 6-lane deal. Well, it's a 6-laner in Nampa. I'm sorry. It's a 4-laner at Caldwell. The traffic is so bad that it comes to a dead stop. So they want to expand that section of freeway from Nampa to past Caldwell.
I have been in that dead stop. I know what you're talking about.
It's ugly. I mean, you could actually read a book.
We've got a caller with us.
Oh, really? That's what we're here for.
10 minutes from 9 o'clock. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
Hey, paying taxes for these roads, we've been doing that since, I don't know when, 80s. And if we're going to pay more taxes, we need somebody that knows how to do roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. uh, Probably I go to Yellowstone quite a bit. It's not just here. So going over to Island Park, they just redid that whole section of road a couple
Right.
year, section. What was it, a couple of years ago, and that whole thing came right back up the next year.
Well,
Yeah,
And
and
and I have argued for a long time that we need to use more of the private contractors to build the roads rather than state employees. Um, the state should oversee the construction to specific road construction standards, and there is a long list of those. They're published by the National Highway Safety whatever. Everybody's got this huge list of standards. They have to be enforced. If a private contractor is building that road, the state has to come in and assure the payor, which is the state and or the federal government, because we get a lot of money from the feds, that the road is built up to the appropriate standard. And I wonder sometimes if the uh, state and county employees or road district employees have that same set of rules and standards, and who comes in and looks over their shoulders to make sure they're doing the thing right.
and I want to thank the caller.
Correctly. I'm sorry, correctly.
And I was telling you during the break when I drove out to Burley a couple of weeks ago on Route
Sure.
30, there are big stretches of highway where it's really good, and then you go through a couple of miles and you just wonder what happened, and then you get back to a good stretch, and then another. And I know some of it was floodwaters in certain spots, but overall, it doesn't seem that there's a lot of consistency on that highway.
Well, and part of it is that the because of the constraints on money, they'll go in and say, okay, here's a 2 mile section of road that's really bad. So we'll go in and we will resurface that whole section of road this year, but the rest of the road doesn't get back on the schedule for replacement or reconstruction for 6 to 10 years down the road because they don't have any money for it. And in that interim period of time, the thing falls apart in our face. Now, the roads locally are not good. You can just almost go anywhere, and it's like driving at the Dodgems track at the county fair. That.
I would want to be out there
Oh,
after dark because I wouldn't be able to see these huge craters.
yeah, it would just swallow your car. But at the same time, this week and next week, we will see the final remainder of permafrost. That's not permafrost down here, for heaven's sakes.
Close enough
The deep
for the
frost.
yeah deep
It'll
frost.
be sucked out of the ground and through the road bases, and then we'll begin to see some real uh, wreck on our roads because the frost has been held down in the deep underneath the road bases. That's going to get sucked out with this heat, and now all of a sudden, before everything's dries out and it gains its stability, we're going to beat those roads up. In 2 more weeks, the roads are going to look considerably worse than they do today. We do have a couple of helps coming on that. One is the $52 million that the legislature appropriated additional monies this year, took it out of the general fund and put it into the transportation department to help facilitate the road damage due to the severe winter weather. Another thing that's going to happen is that they took, I think the number is $17 million from the Department of Transportation to fund the Idaho State Police Department. They took that out of the DOT. Actually, it's IDT, Idaho Department of Transportation. They took it out of IDT and put it back in the general fund. I don't have a real argument with that. The ISP, they got no business being under the transportation department anyway. They need to be over in the general fund where we can keep an eye on them.
We've got another caller with us, and
Okay.
we're about 2 minutes away from the end of the half hour. Go ahead, caller. You're up next.
Yes, Bill and Steve. Talk about the tax and the gas money and stuff there on that working in construction. If you see the budget that the state takes to Boise area from our gas fund to do our work around here, it's enormous to try and get work done around here. So most of the budget we have to do around here is when patching the road, just doing the overlay instead of tearing the road up and doing it right, because majority of the money goes up to always Boise to do always that work up there. And they always got years out and millions of dollars, and they cut our gas tax around here going to Boise that takes the majority of the roads there.
No, that gas tax could go away under the bracket proposal, right?
No, it does not go away. It will stay in place. What they do with the Senator Brackett's proposal is that the federal government there's 25 cents a gallon on every gallon of motor fuels that the federal government collects, and that, in theory, comes back to the state to pay for state transportation requirements. Now, the federal government never does anything according to theory. However, full disclosure, the state of Idaho is a net recipient of federal tax collections. In other words, we get more money back from the federal coffers than we put into them in the first place.
We should mention that part of that reason we see a lot of the highway money going to the Boise area is more pavement,
More
and
people.
they have more representatives and more people.
More people. Now, you take, I call it the Treasure Valley, and this is a very broad definition, but in my mind, that stretches from Mountain Home, Idaho to Ontario, Oregon. And so we suck in those little areas along the edge of that corridor and call it the Treasure Valley Corridor. There's already 750,000 people on that corridor. That's not quite half the population of the state of Idaho, but it's
Mightily
real
close.
close.
40%.
I'd say closer to 45, between 45 and 50.
We've got to wrap up, but anything on your agenda that you got to mention that's upcoming?
Not that we have upcoming. I think the city of Hanson, was it Hanson, is going to be the capital for a day
Friday.
on Friday of this week. The governor brings a lot of his staff members down, and they put on a big deal and say, okay, it's capital for today. Here's the governor. And I think it will be at the school. I'm not sure.
I gotta add this. I think they're coming because they really want to go to the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Yeah, right.
And so on their way out of town, they can do that.
Yeah, they'll go to St. Patrick's Day.
Brad Little can wave and say hi to everybody in the crowd.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Outside of that, the legislature is getting close to wrapping up. We got 10 more days up there. So it's interesting. We're going to see a lot of like Brackett's bill coming through there. It'll be interesting to see if it gets enough hearing and gets a full floor vote. And I really hope it does. We got to pour that money into roads. It just scares me to death. But we can't continue to use a graveled road to promote our commerce and industry.
No, see, he kept that clean, but he's better at that than I am. The 43. 43,
man.
Bill Colley with you, along with Steve Millington. We'll see you again next week.
Yes, we will be back.
News is coming up next. Going to be talking a little bit about the war on Christianity. Yes, we're borrowing a phrase normally associated with the left. War on this, war on that, fill in the blank. But you be the judge in the next half hour of the program right here on KLIX.